This is Michael Popok, and by the looks of things, it's time for Legal AF. Did Judge Cannon just use the J word in her courtroom in front of Donald Trump and Jack Smith? Did she just say jury trial during a hearing concerning whether to dismiss Donald Trump's indictment? Did she look Donald Trump effectively in the eye and say, the things you're raising as arguments to dismiss your indictment are better raised in front of the jury? Did that happen? Well, you'd know if you watch Legal AF. Here's a clip.
Michael Popok, let's go on to Judge Eileen Cannon, where I don't know what her prism is other than Donald Trump. Am I helping you, sir? Donald Trump, am I making your stay here a pleasant one? I think Judge Cannon's courtroom in Fort Pierce is hospitality for Donald Trump. Perhaps that's what she's auditioning for, or perhaps something more nefarious. But let's talk about this hearing that went down in her courtroom this week. There were multiple motions to dismiss the indictment filed by Trump's co-defendants and Trump and his co-defendants, including one under the Presidential Records Act, where Trump claims that when he puts our classified documents and nuclear secrets into boxes and then ships them to Mar-a-Lago, all of our national defense information, our nuclear codes, our war plans, you name it, it becomes his personal documents. And you probably hear Trump talk about the Sox case, the Sox case. What he's referring to is that back in 1999, when Bill Clinton was writing a personal autobiography before leaving the White House, Clinton had certain personal notes that one of these MAGA legal groups that are not led by lawyers tried to then sue the National Archives for back in 2011. And the judge was ultimately like, but aren't these Clinton's like personal like notes and his own notebooks? Like, that's not government record. So what Trump says is Sox case. Clinton had personal notes that he kept a notebook in a drawer. I should get classified documents. Not get them, not just declassify them. They belong to me. They're mine now. They're not the U.S. government's. So that's Trump's argument there. Trump also argues that the Espionage Act, something that's been around for quite some time, is unconstitutionally vague as applied to the facts here. And Popok, that's like a tinfoil argument to say that the Espionage Act is unconstitutionally vague. And Trump goes, but the words unauthorized possession and unauthorized use are very confusing. No, it means you're not authorized. Unauthorized. There's nothing vague about what the statute says. You're not authorized to take national defense information. Did you take it as a national defense information? Were you authorized? And so there was a hearing on that. And Popok, you want to talk about what went down? But yes, she used the J word, which I'll let you talk about. But I didn't find her order that she ultimately ruled and rejected Donald Trump's motion to dismiss without prejudice, not with prejudice. Without prejudice. I don't know. I just think that it was a bunch of garbled word salad that shows she has no clue what she's even talking about, and she's trying to find ways to help him. When I read that order,
the bar, you can see how low the bar is. I got excited when she just actually formed the word jury during an aspect of the hearing. The hearing went most of a day up in Fort Pierce. And I've told people I've been up in that courthouse. It's a very small courthouse, has a couple of courtrooms, and she occupies one of them. Actually, she's the only judge that sits up there. And Donald Trump showed up. There he is. And his, for a minute there, I thought that was the Penguin from the old Batman movie, but that is actually Donald Trump in the back of a car.
Not Kate Middleton.
And not Kate Middleton with an AI thing. And then on top of that, Jack Smith. He's not, I love the fact he goes to support his team. He's not Jay Bratt and others, Jim Pierce and others make the arguments, but Jack's always there. Flies down to Florida for these things. Went on for most of the day. And for the reporting inside the room, and just to be clear for people that we do the best we can with what we can get our hands on. If it's a McAfee, Georgia thing, we're able to do YouTube and put it up on the MeidasTouch network when he does a hearing. But if we're talking about federal court and even state court, you either have to be in the courtroom or you have to rely on trusted legal watchers that we do trust to report. And so the reporting in the room, that's why I say it that way, from inside the courtroom, being no audio or video feed available, is that she spent most of the time after not buying, is I think it's putting it kindly, Donald Trump's lawyer's argument that the over 50-year-old Espionage Act, which is the number one tool of law enforcement about the mishandling of classified information, is somehow vague because, well, as the president, I had, pardon me, guys, as the president, I had some sort of ex-president security clearance, Q clearance with the Energy Department, and if you then have the Presidential Records Act, and those two things combined, and then if I read the Espionage Act, come on, the words you can decipher with a Webster's Dictionary for Children. That's all it takes, and she's not. As much as we have criticized Judge Cannon, she's not going to go down in her own history as having declared that the Espionage Act is vague and unenforceable. Okay, even that's a bridge too far, even for her in this case, and then have the 11th Circuit go, huh? What? Then, okay, so we'll put that aside for a minute. She spent apparently most of her time, though, moving the advocates, meaning Donald Trump's lawyers and I guess it was Kais and Blanche. You'll tell me if I'm wrong, and the lawyers for the prosecution into the thing that seems to be troubling her, which is this vindictive prosecution, selective prosecution thing, which is Donald Trump's BS defense that somehow the Biden Department of Justice has co-opted the special counsel's office, who is, as a version of election interference, is prosecuting him, not because he committed crimes. She was unnaturally interested in that at a hearing that had nothing to do with that. And so that gives me pause about, that's interesting. Why is she so interested in that? That should be, she should have gotten rid of that off the briefing without holding a hearing, let alone that she finds it interesting. That's not a great sign for where her head is at. We're still waiting. So yes, I think I took cold comfort, as you did, that she dismissed the most ridiculous, or denied the most ridiculous of Trump motions, with others left to come. He's got like 6 or 7 other motions to dismiss that she just hasn't gotten around. She just hasn't found the time up in Fort Pierce to decide on. That's another example that we've made on this Legal AF, about how a unsophisticated, immature, professionally immature judge who doesn't really know how to handle things and or wants to throw a bone to Donald Trump as the defendant, even though she used to work in the Department of Justice at some point in her career, it just finds ways. She's not that busy, is my point. I don't know why I'm so tongue-tied. She's not that busy in Fort Pierce. I've been up there. She's got a bunch of drug cases that are often in the Southern District of Florida. She's got a couple of immigration cases. And then she's got this case called U.S. versus Trump. And she should be, here's my rant. She should be dropping all the other stuff on her plate. And she should be doing like Judge Chutkan and saying, okay, I got these 9 motions to dismiss for Donald Trump. 4 of them I decide on the papers have no merit the way Judge Chutkan did. And I'm going to deny without a hearing. These 5 are sort of interesting, and I'm going to put them all over a 2-day period, back to back. Everybody come down and go to the DoubleTree Inn and go to the Subway if you're Jack Smith in Fort Pierce, and let's get to the bottom. And I want evidence. I don't want a hearing on this, and then I'm going to make a ruling. That's what an appropriate judge would do. This ain't canon. And then when she denies things, I've never seen a judge, and this isn't a compliment, I never saw a judge use less words to deny something. In federal court, I have a magistrate judge in a case of mine right now that on simple discovery disputes, I get 6 and 7 pages of a written order. And on major issues like this is what she does. So there's still a group of people out there, former prosecutors included, who think that this is leading to a bad place, that we're still waiting on her order on the motion for reconsideration related to witness identity. I'll turn it back to you for the witness number 5, who decided he's not going to wait around to see if Judge Cannon is going to out him. He's going to out himself and testify against Donald Trump, basically by CNN. We'll talk about that next. And we were still waiting on that decision. So we're all waiting on the things that are necessary for Jack Smith to go take that appeal to the 11th Circuit and maybe seek some additional relief, including the replacement of the judge. But as you've always said, she's not making decisions, and she's not making decisions that matter. And we're playing an elaborate, unfortunate, and dangerous game of magic 8 ball with her. It's always like, well, are we going, for those that are listening to us, I'm shaking a magic 8 ball. Like, are we going to have this trial in May? No, I don't think that's reasonable. Well, is it going to be in July? I don't know. It depends on the weather that day. I mean, make an effing decision, right, wrong, or indifferent. Let Jack Smith do the next best thing and take it up on appeal, and let's get this thing going. But this, watching this, as you like to say, this performative theater, this major, I was going to use an improper term for masturbation, thing that's going on in that courtroom is getting not only frustrating, but dangerous, because we're not going to have the American people know one way or the other whether the person they're going to vote for the highest office in the land and the leader of the free world, I am sorry, I want to know whether he committed violations of the Espionage Act and obstructed justice as part of my decision making before I pull the lever. That's just me. Call me crazy.
Popok, only you could bury the metaphor in the underlying statement itself, make the confession, and then move on it, and then make it look very elegant right there. When you say less word, that these orders are short, the words that are included on her orders where she denies something without prejudice, which is for all purposes like a non-ruling ruling, because it doesn't do anything. It's just like, yeah, bring it back in the future. When you read this thing, like, it doesn't even make any sense. Like, it goes, although the motion, this is what Judge Cannon writes, although the motion, referring to Trump's completely frivolous motion to dismiss, although the motion raises various arguments warranting serious consideration, the court ultimately determines, following lengthy oral argument, that resolution of the overall question presented depends too greatly on contested instructional questions about still fluctuating definitions of statutory terms, phrases as charged, along with at least some disputed factual issues as raised in the motion. For that reason, rather than prematurely decide now whether application of the Espionage Act in these circumstances yields unsalvageable vagueness despite the asserted judicial gloss, the court elects to deny the motion without prejudice. And you may go, hey, Ben, break down this legalese. I can't. This is a bunch of word salad. She sat there, clicked her thesaurus, and just started using like whatever word she thought was the big word, like indubitably, and just starts putting that there, because that makes absolutely no sense at all. The Espionage Act is not unconstitutionally vague. It's been around for a long time. It charges, it's used to charge people who do things like steal national defense information. It's very clear, and that's where we're at. But what's also very clear, and I want to share with you just two clips right now from Brian Butler, employee number 5. What's very clear is that there's real world consequences to what Judge Cannon's doing for our national security. This is not a game. Nuclear codes, war plans, the defense capabilities of our country and our allies. This is not a game. And especially when you have Donald Trump meeting at the crime scene with Putin's buddies, right? Viktor Orban was just there at Mar-a-Lago, who were the first people that Donald Trump invited to our White House. Kislyak and Lavrov, Putin's number 2 people. The Putin regime's top people went into our Oval Office in 2017. They were the first people Trump had. He kicked all of his staff out, kicked all of our people out, allowed the Russians to go in there as they smirked and mocked us in our Oval Office, and Donald Trump gave them national defense information there and then tweeted about it before it was X and this whole Elon Musk mess. And Trump said, yeah, I can give him whatever I want to give him. He said it. He said it. We know he transmitted national defense information there. And now we know this past week in the crime scene where he has all these documents all over the place. He's got Viktor Orban there. People could just go in and out. And Brian Butler, who's employee number 5, identified as employee number 5 in the indictment and superseding indictment, worked at Mar-a-Lago for over 20 years. He started as a seasonal valet. He then ended up basically building a private business that was the kind of chauffeur for all of, they would drive the people from Mar-a-Lago to the airports or to their private jets. That was all the business did. So Butler became best friends with Carlos de Oliveira, Donald Trump's co-defendant. Ultimately, Butler was provided with Trump lawyers, and Butler said, no, I need my own lawyer. I'm not going to go along with this. These issues are serious. I'm not going to screw over my country for Donald Trump, whereas Carlos de Oliveira did right there. You see Butler on the right. You see de Oliveira, now co-defendant de Oliveira, on the left, who's being represented by Trump lawyers. First, let me show you this clip of Brian Butler saying the reason that he's coming forward now to share what he observed, and it's because of the way Judge Cannon has behaved. Play this clip.
You are Trump employee number 5. You're a central witness in the classified documents investigation. Why are you speaking out publicly with your story now?
Well, I mean, it's been almost a year since FBI agents showed up at my house when my wife was at home. And, you know, over the course of the last year, emotionally, it's been a roller coaster. You know, a couple weeks ago, Judge Cannon says she's going to release the names of the witnesses. You know, you go from highs and lows in this. And instead of just waiting for it to just come out, I think it's better that I get to at least say what happened than it coming out in the news, people calling me like crazy. I'd rather just get it out there. And, you know, the hope is at least I can move on with my life and get over this.
Because here are the types of things that he observed. And now I could show you a ton of clips, but I'll just show you one more. So as a driver, he would have guests from Mar-a-Lago who would be in his car, so he would hear things. And so remember how we previously reported on the MeidasTouch network and Legal AF how this Australian billionaire named Anthony Pratt, who paid over $1 million to be a member at Mar-a-Lago and to go to the various parties, was given our nuclear secrets about submarine capabilities as they related to Australia. And then remember, Anthony Pratt then told that information to a number of prime ministers in Australia, former prime ministers in Australia, top government officials, and people in the press and some of his own staff. Now we know how that all came about. It was Brian Butler who first heard Anthony Pratt brag that Trump gave him our nuclear secrets while he was at Mar-a-Lago. And then Jack Smith pursued Anthony Pratt because Butler, that's what great investigative work is, Butler told Jack Smith about Pratt, then Jack Smith went to Pratt and all the people who Pratt then told. But here's Brian Butler again. This is a Trump guy, right? This is a lifelong Trump, someone who spent 20 years as a Trumper, who's now not a Trumper because he saw Trump giving our nuclear secrets away to people. Here's Brian Butler talking about Trump giving our nuclear secrets to Australian billionaire Anthony Pratt as a quid pro quo. Play this clip.
Were there ever any instances when you were still working there that you witnessed where Trump was, in your view, carelessly throwing around national security information?
You know, this really, stood out to me, but in, I believe it was April of 2021, there was a member, Anthony Pratt, who he was coming, he flew in the night before.
He's an Australian billionaire.
He finishes his meeting with the former president, gets in the car, and his chief of staff says, "How did the meeting go?" Pratt, without saying, just says, "He told me," and it would be, U.S. military, classified information of what he told him about Russian submarines and U.S. submarines. And that's really all I remember hearing, and I went, what? I'm thinking this. I'm in the car, I'm like, did I just hear that? So it wasn't like, oh, the meeting went well, we talked about it. He went straight to the point. He told me that the U.S. subs and with the Russian subs and, something that would more than likely, in my mind, be classified.
So it was clear to you that he was basically seeking access to Trump.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, red flags went up in my mind years before that.
So Anthony Pratt, this Australian billionaire that you're talking about, he would pay a lot of money to come and have these New Year's Eve parties in Mar-a-Lago.
So it might cost $1,000, $1,500 per person. He was giving $1 million. And I think at the height, he had 30 or 40 people there. So something that would be 50,000, let's just say max 50. Here's a guy that's just buying access. It's very easy to see.
Popok.
Yeah, I mean it's what you and I predicted when you have bad judges doing interesting things, people are going to respond and react to their own best interest. Unfortunately, Brian Butler, again, I mean, as amiable as he appears in giving his quote unquote testimony to CNN, at much personal risk, he's come forward. There's a reason why people are generally listed as unindicted co-conspirators and not by name. It's to protect them. He's decided to step out of the shadows, and that means he's going to be a lot, he said, I just want to move on with my life. I mean, that was a little bit of a naivete, unfortunately, by him, because I'm sure after that came out and him jumping off sides, to put it mildly, against his former friend and employer, Donald Trump, he will now be doxxed mercilessly and attacked mercilessly by MAGA if he hasn't already been, which is the things that the prosecutors have to worry about, which is the reasons that they've wanted to have people like Brian Butler not have their names disclosed, because they're not worried about the ratings. They're not worried about, they're worried for people like Brian Butler that they won't have people like him cooperate, or in this case, the FBI showing up at his door in the future for their own future investigations because of what Donald Trump unleashes on these people. It's not just today's criminal investigation and prosecution of Donald Trump. It is all future. It's the policies around all future ones. And so I sort of, in a way, have a lot of pathos and sorrow for the fact that Brian Butler felt he had to come forward before he was outed. He was obviously worried, as we said, with Judge Cannon was going to do it for him, and he wanted to get out in front of the narrative and shape it. But it also, listen, whether it impacted Aileen Cannon, because that actually clip came out before that hearing that she held, we will never know, and she'll never admit whether it did or it didn't. I mean, certain things in the atmosphere have to penetrate even the courthouse in Fort Pierce. Like the Espionage Act, she had to have known that a recent National Guardsman had just got sentenced to 16 years for a violation of the Espionage Act up in Massachusetts with the Department of Justice. So, some things have to, it's not hermetically sealed, the room. And the question is, are more people going to come out like Brian Butler? There's about half, he's number 5. There are others in that indictment, some of which you and I have been able, along with others, to piece together who they are. There's administrative assistants, EAs and personal assistants that used to be with Donald Trump in the White House, that went with him to Mar-a-Lago. 2 women in particular, they've cooperated with the government. There's housekeepers. Let's just talk about the Mar-a-Lago case. There's housekeepers. There's people in the kitchen. There's people that make the beds. There's landscapers. There's all sorts of eyes and ears that have been cooperating with the Department of Justice. I'm sure in one way, Jack Smith sort of smirked a bit that Butler decided to go on CNN, but on the other way, he's worried about what will happen if all these other people come forward while he's trying to preserve the sanctity of a criminal justice process against somebody who's out of control in Donald Trump, and he's getting no help from his judge. So I liked it. It was really interesting, and he's going to testify against Donald Trump. But there's a bigger picture here that I am concerned about.
Well, and that's what we, the people, deserve to have these trials, because this evidence needs to come out. I mean, when you talk about the Mar-a-Lago case, it's not, whatever the MAGAs want to say this is, these are just lefties and Marxists and whatever. No, these are people who worked for Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, who observed what he did, who are compelled to testify about Trump's conduct in stealing our national defense information. When you talk about the case involving Trump's attempt to overthrow the results of the 2020 election, the witnesses in that case, it's not Marxist, communist, whatever the stupid stuff they say. It's Mark Meadows. It's Donald Trump's former chief of staff. It's Donald Trump's former vice president who won't endorse him, Pence. It's Donald Trump's former lawyers. It's Bill Barr. It's Trump's inner circle are the people who are testifying against him, who have observed his criminality. That's what it is there. And facts and evidence matters.
Welcome back. That was Legal AF. We do it every Wednesday and Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this YouTube channel and on audio podcast platforms of your choice. You like a legal show at the intersection of law and politics where lawyers know what they're talking about? How novel. Welcome to Legal AF. If you know everything you need to know about us, you're already part of our audience. We really thank you, seriously, from the bottom of our heart. Take that clip, though. Send it off to friends and family and people in your life and say, hey, you know that podcast I love, Legal AF? Here's an example of it, and maybe they'll join our audience. By contrast, if you have no idea what I'm talking about or who I am, I'm Michael Popok. That was Legal AF, and we invite you to join our show and be a part of our audience. Come and do the live chat with us. We get about 20,000 on live chat every time we record the show. We're usually in the top 3 globally of YouTube Live, and we welcome your participation. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.